Welcome back. This week's episode is going to be a reoccurring guest on the show. Her name is Dr. June Chin, and she is an amazing advocate for the plant and is here to help us answer some of our medical-focused questions. She got her medical degree at Touro University and also holds a bachelor's in food science and nutritional biochemistry from Cornell University, as well as a medical acupuncture degree from Harvard University. She's involved in many aspects of the legal market in New York, including being the vice chairperson of the Cannabis Advisory Board and is an adjunct professor at New York University and Syracuse University. This episode is hopefully going to answer some questions about medical cannabis cards, who may benefit from them, how to get one, some reasons you may not want to get one, and more. Future episodes with Dr. June will dive into more specific topics like cannabis and neurodivergent brains, including autism, ADHD, bipolar, schizophrenia, and more. Having a medical card for students in university, and other episodes will dive into cannabis and fertility, pregnancy, breastfeeding, postpartum care, and more. Because she will be a future guest on this podcast, feel free to comment questions for her on YouTube, Instagram, Patreon, or direct message me wherever you get this podcast. The big seed giveaway is going to start next episode in March and going to continue for the next couple of months until essentially we run out of seeds. The goal for this spring is to get as many people growing cannabis as possible. So make sure you're following along on Bioactive Podcast on Instagram or join the Bioactive Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Now make sure you have a sip of your favorite drink, stretch your legs, relax your jaw, smoke a bowl, and just chill with Dr. June and I for the next hour or so. Welcome back to the Bioactive Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Riley Kirk, and I'm here today with Dr. June Chin, who is the Chief Medical Officer at Leafwell, which is a medical card company. I'm really excited to announce that NAP, the Network of Applied Pharmacognosy, the nonprofit that I'm a co-founder of, is now working with Leafwell to help answer some of your questions about medical cards, make you feel more comfortable, and hopefully get people who are a little apprehensive about it getting a medical card and feeling more comfortable and knowing what steps to take in order to get the help that you need. So welcome to the show, Dr. June. And if you wouldn't mind just giving a little introduction and how you got involved in cannabis and medical cards and what you're passionate about in this field.
Absolutely. It's so great to be here. I was looking forward all weekend to this episode. So thank you for joining me. I started in medical cannabis as a student, as a med student in California decades ago. Before I even became a physician, I was a cannabis patient. I have an autoimmune disease of the spine called ankylosing spondylitis. An attending that I was working with in San Francisco who specialized in HIV and AIDS actually introduced me to cannabis as a medicine. And I've been practicing it ever since. And now I'm the Chief Medical Officer of Leafwell. And Leafwell is the largest virtual integrative cannabis clinic in the United States.
Amazing. I get a lot of questions about the virtual component of Leafwell. Can we talk about that a little bit, about the differences of going through your traditional provider, maybe your primary care provider for a medical card, versus a virtual appointment? Is it the same thing that you're getting? Are there any differences? What's the deal there?
So I can walk you through a typical patient journey.
That'd be great.
Just like myself, I was a patient before I became a physician. And when I asked my doctor, and I still get the same stories from our patients now, you go to your primary care doctor, your neurologist, your pain doctor, your OBGYN, you ask about medical cannabis or maybe how alternatives like plant-based medicine can help with name your condition. And usually the health provider will shrug their shoulders and say, you know what, I can't really help you. I don't know enough. Or let's try these 5 different things first and use it as a last resort. So when you come to Leafwell, our specialists, we have over 100 providers in 30 different specialties. So if you're looking for your rheumatologist, you're looking for your OBGYN, you can see our specialist. We can help integrate medical cannabis with your conventional health routine health, and we can work collaboratively with your local health provider if you wish. Some patients are like, you know what, I like to keep it separate. I don't know if my primary care will be down for this. I don't want to taint that relationship. I'll keep it separate. Some of them are like, great, work with my oncologist. I'm going through chemo and radiation right now. If you can work with my oncologist and create a team approach, I would love that. So that's how it usually goes.
Oh, I love that answer. And I love that you brought up how a lot of physicians would want to prescribe you a bunch of stuff before trying cannabis, even though, most people are already trying cannabis and they're trying to get a medical card after they know that it works, even though some people want to try it for the first time. But I've experienced this with migraines. When I went to my primary care provider, they immediately were like, triptans first, and then we'll see about cannabis. And I'm like, no, like I'm uncomfortable with that. And same thing with my mother-in-law who wanted to use cannabis for sleep, and they essentially made her try benzodiazepines before she was able to try cannabis, which I think is the most ridiculous thing in the world.
And I understand that just from a physician's point of view. When you are working for a medical center, which is usually the case, you have to follow these standard procedures, right? You have to follow the standard of care, and they teach health providers, we do X, Y, and Z. It's like a flow chart. Number 1 is triptans. Number 2, is this other medications. If those 3 things don't fail, then you can offer injections. Then you can offer a pain specialist. So by the time the patient is done with their provider, they have felt defeated. They have felt, usually they'll say to us, I feel like I'm overprescribed, I'm over-medicated. I just want to combine alternative medicines. Or, you know what, I've tried these things, I've had migraines for a decade, and I know it doesn't work. So I can understand why most health providers will revert to what they know. That's just what they knew in their toolbox.
Yeah, and it's also great knowing if you go through Leafwell or if you go through a medical card provider virtually, that the people that you're working with are trained on the endocannabinoid system. They're trained on the different types of cannabis products that, might be available in your area. Where, when I asked my physician about it, she kind of just froze up and was like, oh, I don't know anything about this. And it's like, 1, respect. Thanks for saying that you don't know anything about it. And 2, it's like you want that guidance as a patient. Like you want someone to help walk you through it. And sometimes, actually, often if you don't have a medical card, you're not going to get that guidance through a dispensary because that's not the job of a typical bud tender. It's the job of a medical professional. I think that's awesome. Can you talk about cost at all? Because I know that's another apprehension for many people. How much does it cost to get a medical card? Is that covered by any insurance? What's that situation like?
So Leafwell, we're 5 years old, and originally it is paid out of pocket, right? So it depends on what state you live in. So each medical certification is different. And what we've recently launched is an employee-sponsored benefit program. So we launched this in New Jersey. And the reason why we launched it is, number 1, even with medical and adult states, full legalization, the therapeutic guidance, the desire for therapeutic guidance by patients doesn't disappear. It actually increases. Yep. So our 3 pillars are research, access, and education. And we thought about these out-of-pocket costs. You're paying for the cannabis, you're paying for the provider. We try to make it as low as possible for out-of-pocket costs, but there are going to be patients that really can't afford it or have an employee benefit plan and want to go through their insurance through their employee benefit plan. So in New Jersey, we have 4 municipalities, Teaneck, Orange, Newark, Plainfield, where the civil workers, so the civil workers of the municipalities, which includes the Board of Education, they are covered through their employee benefit plan. So if you think of vision benefit or dental benefit, right, there's a carve-out for that employee. You also get integrative cannabis care. So you get care for getting a medical certification, or maybe you don't want a medical card and you just want advice. You love the dispensary that you go to, you love your bud tender, but you need still some expertise. You can still come into Leafwell, and that gets covered under your employee insurance. So right now,
I didn't know that. That is such a good resource. I love that.
Totally is. So Aetna, has partnered with us and agreed to pay for those provider visits, and as well as Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Wow, that's like melting my heart. That's so cool. And just another like safety consideration for people, do their primary care physicians or even like their family members, do they have to know if somebody has a medical card, or can you kind of keep that private if you do have a medical card, or does it automatically go on your record because it's medical?
No, everything is still HIPAA protected.
Okay,
so
cool.
everything remains confidential between the provider and the patient or the employee. And then what we also have is a 15% discount at in-network dispensaries. So we work with dispensaries that are local in the area. They provide a 15% discount to our employees, well, not our employees, to the employees as part of the benefit plan, so that they have, again, increased access and less out-of-pocket costs.
Oh, awesome. Okay, cool. Before we talk about the benefits of getting a medical card, can we talk about medical versus, quote, recreational or adult use cannabis in general, and what some of these differences are? Do you think there is a difference between medical and adult use? What's your opinion on that?
I don't. I think that the line between medical and adult use is blurred. I think adult use is therapeutic use. A lot of the states would have enacted a medical use first and then has adopted adult use. But I think adult use is therapeutic use. So whether you need it for, at the end of the day, or you need it for Friday night and you want to watch a movie, that's still therapeutic use.
I agree with that too. Yeah. And, I always say like a medicinal plant is still a medicinal plant if you're putting in your body,
Yes.
no matter what. You're not going to just take away the medicinal value because you don't identify within that subject. So great topic. So, I made like a short form video and I was talking about how I was kind of embarrassed that it took me this long to get a medical card, because I do consume for medical reasons, or at least that's, what I think of it as. But can we discuss some of the reasons why somebody might want to get a medical card that maybe they haven't up until this point? Maybe they don't know the benefits you get from getting a medical card versus just, being an adult use consumer and just going to a dispensary and purchasing products. What are some of the benefits of actually getting a medical card?
Well, and I can see why you had waited, because you are an expert, right? So you are in the industry. You're a medical cannabis expert, a cannabis expert, plant-based expert. So you might not have thought getting a card would be beneficial in your case. But most folks don't understand plant medicine in a way that you and I do. And getting a medical card, number one, gives them access to regulated dispensaries, so they know their product is safe, it's third-party tested. They don't have to make guesses on, the 100 SKUs that have showed up, and is this tested, is this batch tested. If they're going to a medical card and they go to a medical dispensary, they know it's good products. Number two is the tax benefits. So it's usually a lot cheaper, and you have tax benefits. Some dispensaries, like here in New York, you can use your health savings account or your flexible savings account. You can keep your receipt. It's deductible.
Nice.
And then third is protections, workplace protections. So you may or may not get drug tested. I know a lot of employers are getting rid of the drug testing, but I think having a medical card, and I've written so many HR notes where having a medical card protects the employee.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So even if you are drug tested and cannabis is on that panel, if you have a medical card, you're okay. You can test hot because you're a medical patient.
It's not 100%. It depends on your employer. For
Okay.
example, if you are a public school bus driver, right? If you're operating heavy machinery, if there are certain companies that if you work for, there are things in their HR manual that states that, and you have to refer to that. But in general, having a medical card is another layer of protection.
Oh yeah, that's a huge layer of protection. Any other benefits before we talk about potential apprehensions someone might have into getting a medical card?
I actually think that if you think of getting a medical cannabis certification, it supports advocacy. It is one more thing that you're getting to support the rest of the industry. It is really saying, to everyone else, to your state laws, because for me, I'm the vice chair of the Cannabis Advisory Board for the New York State Office of Cannabis Management. So I work in the regulatory and policy space. And when we see medical cannabis registered in the state, everything is HIPAA protected, so it's not like they're on a list that everyone can look at. But we'll see, there is 50,000 patients that are registered, and it continues to grow. From a policy and regulatory perspective, we see that medical cannabis is still something that folks want, and we can put in policy to protect them.
Oh, I love that you brought that up, because you're so right. Like, data is how we speak, especially to legislators, right? Is numbers and data. And it's not like your name's being shared, but I make the comparison a lot, and this is going to be a topic of today quite a bit, is like hunting and trapping and cannabis. There's actually a lot of similarities, and one of those similarities is the amount of hunting licenses and trapping licenses and medical cannabis cards. It's like those numbers show that our populations are here to stay. People are interested, people are benefiting from this, and people keep renewing year after year after year. And those numbers, hopefully are growing over time to show that we do need to support these communities. We need to put resources into them. We need to put funding into them in order to keep them alive.
I love that you bring up data, because that's what we have at Leafwell. With our data, we just actually are publishing a white paper about how the cannabis telehealth will increase access to underserved, underrepresented, underinsured areas. We looked at Pennsylvania as the state, but it shows how our integrative cannabis care and our telehealth platform will actually reach areas where the patient might have to drive an hour and a half to 2 hours for OBGYN. So we're looking at increased access to care, not even just cannabis care, to medical care. We're looking at a healthcare model.
And so many medical cannabis patients are also disabled, and driving that far or getting a ride for an hour and a half, 2 hours somewhere is just not practical. So yeah, telehealth is really solving a lot of problems and increasing accessibility quite a bit.
Exactly.
Yeah. So can we dive into this really, really sensitive and stigmatized topic of cannabis and firearms? And before we kind of get too deep into this topic, I do want to say I understand this is a sensitive topic. I understand a lot of people are not, pro firearm, don't think that anybody should own them. I respect everybody's opinion on this. I do believe that there should be background checks. Firearms should be difficult to get. But at the same time, I also see within our community that a lot of people who are passionate about growing their own medicine and using medicine from the earth are also people who live, oftentimes in rural areas, who are also hunting and procuring meat in these kind of alternative ways. And I think that this conversation needs to be had. I'm not sitting here, advocating for everybody to get firearms and cannabis at the same time. Not at all. I just want to start the conversation, because when I made short form videos about this, I received hundreds of comments and DMs saying, this is the main reason why I have not gotten a medical card. And I've never heard anyone talk about it on short form or long form content. So I just want to start the conversation about cannabis and firearms, because it's a topic that, I think it's about due time that we discuss in 2025. So can we talk about, what the main issue is here, if it's a federal issue, if it's a state issue, and maybe you can kind of start 30,000 foot, and then we can get into really detailed questions.
Well, really, cannabis versus firearms, right? I wish I had a simple answer, but there's a frustrating reality. Even if cannabis is legal in your state, the federal government still considers it illegal. Yeah. And because of that, right, you have the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Explosives says, cannabis users, even if you're medical patients, you're not allowed to buy or own guns. All right. It's absurd, because you can drink alcohol, you can take prescription opioids, still own a firearm. You can be prescribed benzos, which have a black box FDA warning for severe impairment, and still own a firearm.
And cannabis is also helping people get off of these extremely dangerous drugs like alcohol, like benzodiazepines, like opiates. And it's almost like you're punished if you're using cannabis instead of these other substances, because then you're losing, fundamental rights.
Right, exactly.
And as you said, it's not impairing your judgment as much as these other substances. It doesn't make people violent like these other substances do. So, it's a matter of discrimination, in my opinion, and it's something I would like to keep fighting for. And I'm not saying I got a lot of faith in our current administration, but, it's something that I think needs to continue to be talked about, because there's just this huge population of people that are affected by it, but also so scared to speak up because people are afraid that they're going to lose rights if they say anything. Can we talk about any court cases that have happened recently? I don't know if you have any to cite. I have a few that I have written down here that have happened in the past maybe 10 years that show any promise towards it being, movement in the right direction, or maybe not the right direction, or anything that's happening at the federal level with some of these cases that have come up, because cases do come up about this because it is, again, a highly talked about topic.
Sorry, I'm glad you bring up the cases because I've been following that as well. I'm not a lawyer, but there's a really interesting case in Oklahoma, U.S. versus Daniels, and it's pretty recent, 2023. A judge in Oklahoma ruled that banning cannabis users from owning guns is unconstitutional. So the judge basically said, look, if we let people drink and own guns, why are we singling out cannabis?
Mm-hmm. And that was very promising too. I saw a few media outlets like the Beard Bros. I don't know if you follow them, but they're a great cannabis media outlet. They were sharing about that. And of course, that's just one case, and that's in Oklahoma. And you said it's state by state by state. But, those small little wins, I think, are promising. And if we see more of those going towards the state level, then, hopefully we can have power in numbers, or at least show people that, this is an issue that keeps reoccurring. Are there any other ones that have ruled in favor, out of favor of cannabis and firearms?
What's interesting is U.S. versus Harrison 2023 in Florida ruled the same thing. So even though Florida didn't pass for adult use legalization, this judge in Florida also said that cannabis users shouldn't automatically lose their gun rights.
Wow, Florida can go both ways. You just don't know about that state.
Yes.
Okay, interesting. And then I also got a lot of questions about, and I don't know if you know anything about this. This is not something I am super educated on. Concealed carry versus not concealed carry. Are the rules any different? Or again, are there just no rules here and it's just kind of up in the air?
Not really. Federal law applies no matter, where you carry your firearm. Some states may have more lenient rules for concealed carry permits, but at the end of the day, the ATF treats all gun owners the same when it comes to cannabis use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so then I guess that leads to a question of, should we continue to essentially just be silent about it? Or like what is the recommended way forward that we can be advocates, we can continue to speak up about this, but we also don't want to endanger. I don't want anyone to endanger themselves. That's why I bring it up, because I'm willing to endanger myself for the sake of education, but I never want anyone else to be in a dangerous situation because of me. So I would, just any guidance on like, what do people do if they really, really want a medical card, but they also do own firearms?
Listen, this is a deeply personal decision. If you rely on cannabis for medical reasons, I think your health should come first. But if firearms is a major part of your lifestyle, whether you're hunting, self-defense, or sport, right, you need to weigh the risks. I think the good news is public opinion is shifting. Legal challenges like the ones we talked about is, going to continue to gain traction. And this isn't going to be the status quo forever.
I love that. So are you familiar with the Pittman-Robertson Act at all for wildlife management?
No, tell me about that.
Yeah, so this is an act that it's for wildlife restoration. So any sales of firearms, ammunition, bow hunting supplies, any of that type of stuff, all of the tax goes towards education, goes to wildlife conservation, goes to safety, and it really is like the North American method of wildlife conservation, and why wildlife conservation is so successful in this country where other countries have failed quite a bit, because we have millions and millions and millions of dollars from all of those sales going back into wildlife conservation. I think we should implement something similar with cannabis medical cards, where the tax involved in some medical card sales, and maybe some of it already is, but I don't think enough is. But I think some of these medical card sales should go back into research, education, training for bud tenders, all of this stuff, and like actually make that allow us to be transparent with where that money is coming from, because the amount of taxes with cannabis is absolutely egregious, and we need so much more research and education, and we're putting a lot of that on the industry right now, but the industry doesn't have any money right now, So I feel like kind of taking that, implementing a similar standard of, the sales from this need to go back into this community, I think we could really start to see some sustainability happening within the community.
Excellent points. I know in New York, as part of the OCM, we do have community reinvestment funds. So we had $1 billion sales last year, and we do use the tax from the sales to reinvest back into communities, whether it's through youth education, et cetera.
Oh, that's awesome. I would love to see it at a federal level if we ever do legalize federally, which I'm a chronic optimist. I'm always like, 5 more years. But I'd love to see that federally just implemented, because I'm a little scared if something does happen federally that our industry is still going to get absolutely railed, for lack of better terms there. But I just think we should look at some method that's already working for sustainability and implement that with us.
Good point.
Can we talk about some of the research that maybe you're involved with through Leafwell or through the state of New York, and what that might look like for medical patients?
So what we're looking at, especially with our employee benefit plans, is what's happening to patients that use medical cannabis. And we've noticed that over time, patients have a 50% reduction in ER visits. It's significant, right? We looked at benzodiazepine and opiate use. We saw a 48% reduction. So when we look at, we see about 15,000 patients a month, right? We're in 37 states, so we have about 500,000 lives. So we really look at the data, and that's what's important to show employers when they are thinking about bringing this as an employee benefit plan. What does it do to absenteeism? What does it do to job satisfaction, to burnout? What does it do to ER visits, primary care visits? I was talking to another employer this morning about their healthcare costs, cancer costs. Cancer costs is one of the main drivers for healthcare costs. So whether it's going to the ER for nausea, vomiting, dehydration. So we are starting to look at what is happening to our medical cannabis patients when they're using cannabis in lieu of the prescription medication, like a anti-nausea medication, Zofran, for example. Yeah. Then they're using Colace. Then using an appetite booster. When they're using cannabis medicine, it actually decreases those ER visits.
Wow, that's incredibly impactful. And the amount just saving on pharmaceuticals, and as you're saying, on ER visits, and just the burden of healthcare, that it's so important to get that data. And so do you publish white papers? You mentioned white paper earlier. Is that typically how you share the data, or how can people kind of read up on this type of data? We
have 7 published journals in peer-reviewed journals. So the white paper that I referenced for Pennsylvania is actually going to be published. So cool. I can certainly give you the links for those.
Oh, that would be awesome. Yeah, I think I would love to read them. I'm sure other people would too. So are you funding other specific research studies through Leafwell, just out of curiosity? Like, if, cannabis and Lyme disease comes up a lot. If somebody, if you had a huge population of people and you wanted to study that more, is that something that Leafwell would do, is essentially fund a study to look into that deeper?
We're always open to conversations. We, universities call us, different states call us, regulators call us. Hey, would you like to do, research with X, Y, and Z? It is always a topic of discussion. So if anyone wants to partner us, wants to learn more information, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Can we talk about the general process involved in getting a medical card? Say, I'm Sally, I'm at home, I'm considering it. Maybe I don't want to do it. Maybe I do. What should I do to even see if I'm eligible? Do I qualify in my state? Is that something that's very variable state to state? Is it easy? Does it take a lot of time? I can say from my experience that it didn't take a lot of time, but can you kind of just walk people through step by step what that might look like? And do you get a physical card? Do you get a medical card, or is it just an email that, you show to your bud tender?
So we get over 1 million visitors to our site a month. So it is a plethora of information from research. So I encourage you guys to look at the research dashboard to different blogs. We have, content on our YouTube that talks about different conditions. So usually I would say Canna Curious patients and consumers will start there and start doing a little bit of research for, migraines, to mast cell disease, to scleroderma, right? We have different things to cancer. They'll start doing the research first. Then they'll look up, their state, and we usually have a whole page dedicated to each state. Is it legal, medical versus adult use? How much does it cost? What are the steps? Pretty easy. Most things are done electronically. A lot of patients don't want to carry a physical card. I know with New York, we had a card for a long time where the patients had to wait for the card to come in the mail, and the state had to print out the card, and it was just onerous. But oftentimes it's electronic. You get it, into your inbox, and then you can shop right away.
Cool. That's pretty easy. And also, I have a Patreon question about travel in general. So traveling, I mentioned travel was easier for me with a medical card. And what I meant by that is like in a vehicle. If I had cannabis on me, like I felt safer having a medical card and being able to be like, your vehicle smells like cannabis. And it's like, yeah, it does, because I'm allowed to have cannabis, But can we talk about airline travel versus vehicle travel versus other forms of travel and the safety? Does it help at all having a medical card in any of these situations, or is it always scary for people who are stoners because we're just loud and smelly all the time?
I love your sense of humor. I would say technically you're not supposed to cross state lines. Most consumers, most patients feel better with a medical card, right? Because if you're in a situation and you pull out your medical card and you say, I'm a patient. Will that get you out of it? I don't know. Were you driving under the influence, right? So it depends on your situation. If you're getting on a plane, you're not supposed to bring any products, right, out of the country, out of the state. You're supposed to stay within. There's reciprocity laws where if you have a medical card, for example, in Maine or in New York, you can use it in Massachusetts. So they have states that have reciprocity laws. But
so that's state by state. It's not like
state.
Every state, if you have a medical card and you're going medical to medical, it's not.
No, it's not. So it depends on the state. You can look at Leafwell. We have that all laid out state by state. But technically, you're not supposed to put it on an airplane.
Yeah, technically, you're definitely not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
Good to know. Thank you for that. You mentioned driving under the influence, and this is a huge issue in the cannabis industry, especially when we're comparing against other things like alcohol, because we do have methods of testing for acute intoxication with something like alcohol. We have the breathalyzer, everybody's familiar with that. Can we talk about any progress we've made with testing for acute intoxication or just like real-time intoxication? Because I know a lot of people are afraid that we're going to have a method to do that. And, cannabis is a lot different than alcohol. It's very fat soluble. It stays in your body for a lot longer. Tolerance plays a huge role. How have we made any progress, and how is that limiting our industry and our patient rights?
I haven't seen anything that acutely tests you, anything that is promising. I would say, if you're driving under the influence, you could get a DUI with taking Benadryl, taking NyQuil. If you're under the influence, you're under the influence. If you're impaired, you're impaired. So that's number one. Number two, as we work with employers, HR is bringing in what's called impairment recognition experts so that they can document, okay, is this employee impaired with cannabis while on the job? Because maybe they're in construction or they are driving a school bus, et cetera. If they're doing something on the job that requires full attention, then they can't be impaired at all. That is what HR is doing, and how we're helping also is risk mitigation. Right? So if you have Leafwell as part of your benefit plan, employees can come to us to make sure they're using the right products. They didn't take that nighttime gummy, before working into work in the morning. So a lot of employers are looking at our employee benefit plan as, half of our employees are using medical cannabis or self-medicating with cannabis. We need to meet them where they're at. We need to help them make sure that they have a trusted provider. We need education and making sure they're taking the right gummies or they're taking the right medicine and they're not impaired at work.
Oh, I love that. Right consumption method too, right?
Yeah.
You're talking about gummies, those can last like 4 hours.
Yes.
Like it can last so long in your system versus inhaling a puff of your vape or smoking. It's just a completely different experience.
Exactly.
Yeah. This topic kind of drives me insane because I really wish we had a way, as you're talking about, of measuring impairment objectively, of like, are you too effed up to operate something? Like, instead of being incredibly discriminatory towards cannabis consumers because this drug happens to stay in your body longer. And I brought this up a couple times, but I was at a science fair a couple years ago and somebody was trying to develop like a goggles, like retina scanning things, so that it traced how well your eyes followed specific stimuli. So then you could kind of create some sort of algorithm to show, based on how quickly you follow that, how impaired you might be. And I think that's really cool, actually, because then no matter if you're on benzos, alcohol, cannabis, if you're too messed up, you're too messed up. If your eyes can't follow it, you shouldn't be driving. But as you said, there's a lot of jobs in general that you just can't be under the influence of anything, like even too much caffeine. If you're shaking and you can't keep your hands still, that's not safe in a lot of positions.
Exactly.
Yeah. Can we talk about whether this is through Leafwell, whether it's something you're passionate about because you are a medical professional? How are we working to educate medical professionals better, so in the future, hopefully we can have a more sustainable system of healthcare where, maybe you don't have to go through Leafwell. Maybe you eventually could talk to your primary care provider and they would know something about how cannabis works in the body. Or do you think those are kind of remain separate?
I do webinars and in-person lectures for medical societies where I am teaching the endocannabinoid system or pain management with cannabis medicine to other physicians and health providers. I also teach at Syracuse at NYU, and this is actually at an undergraduate and graduate level. So
cool.
before you even think about becoming a health professional. So I believe that if you come at it from that level, from an undergraduate level, you can actually make much more of a difference than waiting to just teach the health providers. Because we're a conservative bunch. Like when I talk to my colleagues about medical cannabis, some of them are like, well, I don't want to get sued. Or some hospitals are like, oh, I get federal funding, so I don't want to look like, I don't want to get my federal funding pulled, so I don't want to look like we're supporting this. I mean, there's all sorts of excuses. So it's a little bit more of an uphill battle.
I really like that you brought up federal funding, and that's, has been an issue with getting more cannabis research, at least neutral to positive cannabis research. We do have quite a bit funded through NIDA or these other, the National Institute on Drugs of Abuse, that might be kind of pushing towards the negative narrative there. And almost all of academic funding is government funded research. And because cannabis is still a Schedule I drug, it can be really scary. Like, even if, like, in that state, you're able to research it, people are still like, no. Like, we're not touching that with a 10-foot pole. Absolutely not. So I think, this all really comes down to, like, federal prohibition. Like, every issue we have is federal prohibition. Can we talk about how Schedule III might change things versus descheduling? Like, what do you think that situation is?
Let me ask you that. What is going to be that situation? Someone just asked me that this morning, and, with our current administration, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. The DEA hearing got canceled, and we might not get rescheduling.
Yeah, they literally announced last year, like, hey, we're thinking about maybe talking about rescheduling, and everyone's like, yeah, let's go, this is great. And then they just keep pushing it back, and then it's a new administration, and now it's just like the whole world's on fire, and we're like, we're never gonna get this. And it's just making the cannabis people more radical. Like, we're gonna keep just like leaving society, growing our plants, growing our mushrooms, just taking care of ourselves, because I don't think we can rely on our government to take care of us at all. We can't afford eggs. How are we gonna get medical cannabis?
But you know what? Education is key, and that's what you and I are doing.
Yes, I agree. And we got to keep educating. I mean, again, at least with education, even if somebody was just growing weed at home and extracting it and doing whatever they want, they could still make super educated decisions just by themselves and still kind of be apart from the system. Speaking of education, can we talk about indica sativa hybrid and how you feel about these terms as an educator? Because these have been the main terms used to describe, indica being really sedating, sativa being really uplifting. Is that a way that you're teaching, or what kind of alternative ways are you teaching people about medical cannabis? And what do you think, matters the most when people are choosing new products?
I mean, indica and sativa are still used for marketing purposes. But the way I teach is through chemovars and through the nuances of the different terpenes as well. But to the layperson, to be honest, they often don't want that much information, right?
It's agree.
Like, tell me, is that the sleep gummy? I will take the sleep gummy. I don't need to learn about the different terpenes in there or the different cannabinoid profiles. I don't need to read the label like I do with a food label, for example. I think in general, patients are overwhelmed by their disease, their condition, their symptoms, and they just want a trusted source to say which one is going to work to help me.
I love that. And I make the comparison a lot to pharmaceutical medicine and how simple we make pharmaceutical medicine. We say, here's this orange bottle, take a pill every morning with your breakfast. We don't ask questions about how many active ingredients, what fillers, nobody asks questions about that because they just trust the system and they trust the research and they already trust what's going on there. And I think you're so right with cannabis. It's like, there's this really niche group of educated consumers that I think both of us interact with a lot, especially because of censorship online. Like, that's the only people we can talk to online is the other people who also talk about the same subject. But most consumers don't want to memorize 20 different terpenes and 20 different cannabinoids and say, okay, well, this ratio, and if it's in this consumption method, that it can be so overwhelming for people. And that's why medical cards are so important, because you don't need to learn all of it. You just need somebody who does know everything that can help you guide you towards products that actually work.
Exactly.
Do you ever see that people have really adverse effects to some products versus others, whether that's mental health or physical health, and how do you go about that?
I'll give you an example. We had a patient last week that uses it for focus to help with ADHD. But he also uses an anti-anxiety medication, but he was realizing that he kept needing to call his MD to increase the Adderall and increase the anti-anxiety medication. He couldn't figure out why. It wasn't working as well. And he's using cannabis, and the cannabis works, but then it sort of wears off. So he calls us, and we realized that he wasn't spacing it apart, right? So he was just using everything at once. And then he was
dosing it all like in the morning, like taking all of it at the same time.
Taking it all at once, cannabis medicine, his vitamins, his supplements, and then his prescription medication. And then he wasn't using the right form factor, just like you said, right? So, using the edibles at night so that there's a longer timed release, and then using an inhaled version during the day or for quick rescue remedy, like for the panic attacks, for example. So we went through, okay, what products are you using? Let's look at your prescription medications. Let's look at your daily schedule. What time do you wake up? What time do you have to get to work? What time do you have to, et cetera. And we created a personalized program for him. And then he realized, I actually didn't really need to keep increasing my Adderall. I didn't need to increase my Xanax because I was using all the products incorrectly.
That is a really interesting story. Yeah. And do you help people, like, if they say they have an insanely high tolerance and like, I need to take a tolerance break, but mentally, maybe they have PTSD. Maybe they can't, take a full tolerance break because they don't want those dreams to come back. They don't want that anxiety. They don't want that depression. Do you help people through stuff like that? Like literally helping them decrease their dose in a way that's compatible with their mental health without going cold turkey? Is that something that you would also help provide?
Yeah, because what I found clinically is you don't have to go cold turkey to get the benefits. You can ramp down a little bit, but also use other things that will help you deal with for example, sleep disruption. Maybe you can increase your exercise. Maybe let's look at your diet. What are the types of foods that are you eating? Are you drinking that much caffeine? That could be contributing to the triggers. Like, let's cut back on the caffeine. So there's different levers that you can pull as we pull down on the dosage of the cannabis medicine. And then we could use other plant-based medicines as well, right?
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'm always pro other plant-based
Right.
medicines as well. But I think that's really great. I think tolerance breaks they're just a component of stigma, again, where people feel like they can't be dependent on a medicine and that they have to, every 2 months, every 3 months, take these really radical tolerance breaks that, I'm always like, yo, be easy on your brain, be easy on yourself. Like, in what other situation, like, would you stop taking your antidepressants for 2 weeks just because you're like, dependent on them? Like, that's
your
that's so
diabetes
hard.
medicine. Like, you're going to stop, you're taking your high blood pressure medicine, like, because you want your body to decrease its own blood pressure, right? So you don't think about that with other things. And I would actually say, when I treat patients with menstrual cycles, sometimes they panic. They'll say, like, I had to increase, like, on these days of my cycle. And it's actually, no, you had to increase because your hormones are changing. So it's not that you're building a tolerance, is that you are actually adjusting the cannabis medicine with your cycle. So when they hear that, they feel a lot better. Maybe days 17 through 21, yes, you needed a little bit more. And then you can go back down on days 1 through 5, right? So
I bet the validation people feel just talking to people like you and other medical professionals, where they can just be open and be like, yeah, I had to take 10 dabs today and usually I only take 2. And you can be like, yeah, that's okay. Your pain threshold is different right now because you're on your period,
Right.
Because usually, if I told my doctor I took 10 dabs, they'd be like, oh my God, we got to get you into an institution, because my doctor still is heavily, heavily anti-cannabis. And like, I can't find another one up here that is pro cannabis, which is another reason I got a medical card, because I did want that community and that support. So just shout out to you, because even the research we do, and like when we published like in our 5,000 person study that 91% of people were daily cannabis consumers, just the amount of people were like, this is so validating. I shared this with my mom, my grandma, my brother, like everybody, just because they've never seen themselves represented in data before. And kind of speaking on that subject, some of the more interesting data that we've gotten through the nonprofit has been a significant amount of people, according to our data, can't feel edibles, or at least take a large amount of product to feel any sort of effect. Is this something that you've also experienced working with cannabis consumers? Can you speak on that at all? Can you speak on why that might be, or what other consumption methods might work better for these people that can't feel edibles?
some people just can't metabolize it in oral form, edible tinctures, capsules. I'll give you a personal story. My grandmother, who's in her 90s, my grandmother's still alive, she's in her 90s, she had shingles. And it went down from her sacrum, her buttocks, all the way down to her ankle. So painful. And she was 92 at the time. We used gabapentin, we used, the salves, we used everything, acupuncture, we did everything we could for her, but it was just so painful. And I said, okay, I'm going to give you a gummy. And she didn't know it was cannabis. I'm going to give you this gummy. See if this helps for the pain. 1 milligram, nothing. 2 milligrams, 2.5, 5, 10, 20. I gave her 25 milligram gummy, and she was completely fine. This is a 90-pound, 92-year-old Chinese grandma. And I was like, oh yeah, I'd see this in the clinic. It just doesn't work. I couldn't teach her how to inhale, but the gummy just didn't work for her.
Wow.
That's it.
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten messages where someone's like, I've taken 500, 1,000 milligrams of THC. And then I talk about this a lot on the podcast, like probably too much. Sorry, everyone who's getting annoyed by this. But I talk about it a lot, and I've received some messages like, hey, I'm really glad you talk about this, because I was taking 500 milligrams of THC and didn't realize it was contributing to my migraines. Like I was not getting high from it, but I was actually getting adverse effects from taking too much THC.
With migraine sufferers, I actually just taught this at the Syracuse class last week, you have the rebound headaches. So if you have to be careful, if that THC goes too high in milligrams, you can actually get a rebound effect, and it'll just smack you in the face. So you have to really play with that therapeutic value, your optimal dose, and really understand, what is your threshold? Will it send you another migraine, or take a little bit, just enough so that it turns the volume down on that migraine, or you can recover from that migraine faster?
Migraines are such a touchy thing with cannabis. Like, it took me years to dial in on how to treat myself for migraines, because if it was just, it's very strain specific, at least for me. It's not just THC that helps. It's very strain specific. One, CBD, amazing. Need CBD in there always. And then two, like just gravitating towards the really savory varieties like GMO, which normally I would never gravitate towards. Like, I'm a sativa girl, but when I have a migraine, like, sativas make it worse. Like, I can feel my brain just like pulsing, and it gets worse when I consume those types of varieties. So then eventually learning, like, okay, something in these savory varieties is definitely helping with my migraines. And I actually just met a migraine researcher in New York at the SUNY Cannabis Conference. And I was telling him about this, and I'm like, please use the data from the community. Use the data from me. Like, I'll get data for you, but like, there's more to the story, I think, than just, THC and CBD.
And I have found that with migraine sufferers, prevention is key. So actually don't wait until the migraine is coming on before you use medical cannabis. Like, preemptively use it. And you're very in tune with your body. Like, most migraine sufferers are. And they wake up, they could just feel it, like, I will get something today. Like, it's coming. Just take it then.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice. And like, the aura is insane with migraines. Like, I recently started getting migraines with aura over the past, I'd say, 2 years. And the first time I got one, my vision was like cracked. And I'm like, I'm like trying to work, and I'm like squinting and moving. And I'm like, whoa, why am I trying to work? I can't see right now. I need to like go take care of this before it gets significantly worse. So I think these topics just are so important to talk about. There's just the different dosing, the different, types of medicine that we use for these different. And honestly, sometimes you also do incorporate pharmaceuticals as part of your treatment regimen, which I know a lot of people in the natural products and the herbal industry are a little apprehensive about, but also a lot of times, like, that is a treatment plan that works for people. Is that something that either you or Leafwell talks about, is combining maybe cannabis medicine with pharmaceutical medicine, and either, finding a better balance of both, or, kind of working that out so people feel more comfortable with drug interactions and just feeling more comfortable with that?
And that's what integrative healthcare is. And that's what we're about. Integrative healthcare is using the best of both worlds. It's not all or nothing. It's really making sure that you have that toolbox, or you can pull on those different levers. Maybe it is diet related and you can do just diet and cannabis. Or maybe there are sometimes, there are triggers and you do need prescription medication, and you'll use prescription medication at that time. So it's not all or nothing. And if you are able to figure out, which ones that you can lean on during different flare-ups, different seasons, different stressors in your life, it just helps you that much more. Why would you have this one or all or nothing approach?
I agree. And I encourage the cannabis community to be a little more open about this too. I think there's a lot of hate towards people who do take any sort of pharmaceuticals. And to me, it's like, if it's working for you, you won. Good job. Like, it's working. Keep doing it. And a lot of people will just be silent about that, be silent about pharmaceuticals, because they don't want this weird shadow of hate from the community. So again, I think that's where talking with a qualified healthcare professional, and you don't need to like justify yourself in that way, is like a really, really important resource.
Well, I think I think culturally we tend to do that with, it's like one bad drug, good drug.
Yeah.
Right. So pharma's just bad, and natural plant-based medicine is good. I have a thing with bad drug, good drug. It's like, what helps you?
Yes.
Right?
Is it working? Is it helping you? Is your life better with this regimen? Great. Yeah. That should be the end goal always. And that is the end goal for most healthcare professionals.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay. I do have a question from Patreon from a woman named Heather, so I'm going to ask that. And then I'm going to give you the floor to just talk about anything that you want regarding medical cannabis cards and talking to this community, and then we'll end the episode. Okay. Heather says there seems to be a lot of confusion and misleading information about acquiring a medical card in Texas. Can you clarify the rules? For instance, is a person living in Texas eligible for a card through Leafwell? Also, would a person living in Texas be able to get a card directly from a medical provider in a legal state?
So because we operate in 37 states, I'm in New York, I can't say that I know every state to the T. And regulations change all the time. So I would encourage you to go to the website, scroll down on Texas. There's detailed information about that. Or you can call our patient coordinator, or you can, click on the chat box and chat with us. So we are here for every state. For, some patients will say, I'm a teacher and I work in this state, but then I drive to this state. Every situation is different. So I encourage you to reach out to us.
Oh, that's cool. You have a chat box too, because you're so right. Like, not everyone lives in like a very linear world where it's like, hey, I live in California. Can I get a medical card here? Like, it's so much more complicated in these other states. So thank you for answering that. The floor is yours if you want to discuss anything else regarding medical cards, or if you just want to let people know where to find you, where to keep up with your content. I've seen a bunch of awesome videos with your face in it, just educating the masses, and I think they're absolutely wonderful. So how do people stay in touch with you? How do people, I guess you just kind of talked about how people learn more, but anything
Absolutely. else? I think we've covered so much today. Thank you. That was really thorough. Leafwell.com. You can find us there. Again, we have over 100 providers in 30 different specialties. We are working with employers through their employee-sponsored benefit plan. So if you want this covered under your employee benefit plan, please talk to your employer. Please reach out to us. Let us know if you're covered under a certain insurance network. Let us know that too. We want all of the information. We are a data-led company. We believe in research, access, and education. So please stay in touch with us. And we would love to continue the conversation.
Love that. Thank you so much for being on the show. I feel like you've answered so many important questions for me and for the community. I also want to let the Bioactive community know that Dr. June will be on a few times in the future. She's going to be a reoccurring guest because she honestly knows so much about this field and all of these kind of weird things that all of us kind of question, and we're like, I don't know about that. So, feel free to ask me questions for the next time that she comes on so that we can be prepared about that. I will always post on the Patreon and the Instagram when we're having a new guest on or a new topic on with Dr. June, and you can ask her questions ahead of time. So thank you so much for taking the time to sit here and answer all these wonderful questions, and I'll see you next time that you're on.
All right. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Mad love, everyone. Catch you next time.